Hi, Beth. Hello, Beth and Bailey. Good to have you both on. I'm kind of a little surprised. We had about 20 people signed up, and I wonder what's going on out there in the world that only 2 of you are here so far. Beth, you're still muted.
I wonder if it's because there was no reminder.
I thought I sent a reminder yesterday.
I don't remember.
Yeah, you did.
Oh,
You did.
I thought
That's the
I
only
did.
reason I remember.
I thought I did.
Thank you for
yeah.
sending that.
I thought
I
I
was going to
did.
say, at first I was like, maybe it isn't this week because it's Thanksgiving. And
I know. That
Yeah.
must be why.
had it away.
Yeah. But I did send, so Bailey, I did send that yesterday.
Did
Okay.
send? I don't remember.
Okay, so I think we'll get started anyway. And truthfully, when we scheduled these, of course, I knew this was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, but back, in September, who thought that it would be a week that people might take off and whatever. Anyway, I'm so glad that the 2 of you are here, and I imagine others might join us. It is my privilege to welcome Lucy Marshall, who is the Tversky Education Fellow at the Jewish Women's Archive. And I would bet that both of you are somewhat familiar with the Jewish Women's Archive. Is that true? Yeah, I had a feeling. So we're really thrilled that, as I think both of you probably know, on the horizon, Hebrew College is building this new campus at Temple Rayam. And JWA is going to be one of our partners on this new campus. So that's very exciting for us. Additionally, you might notice Lucy's name for those of you who are involved with Mayim Chaim. that Lucy is also on the staff of Mayim Chaim as the director of the Rising Tides Open Waters Network, I think it's called, Open Waters Mikveh Network. So we're really thrilled that Lucy plays both roles with two of our close partners, and we're just thrilled to have her with us this morning. So I'm going to turn it over to Lucy, okay?
Thank you so much. Welcome, Beth and Bailey. Really excited to meet both of you. Thanks for making time to be here. And I'll be doing some sharing, and also especially because we're a small group, but even if we weren't, feel free to chime in and share as any questions or reactions that come up as we move through our time. So I know both of you said you're a little familiar or maybe a lot familiar with JWA, but just as a background, JWA is a national organization dedicated to collecting and promoting the extraordinary stories of Jewish women. We explore the past as a framework for understanding the issues important to women today. We inspire young people with remarkable role models, and we use Jewish women's stories to excite people to see themselves as agents of change. And my role is the Tursky Education Fellow. I've been with JWA in that role. This is my second year in the fellowship. And really the purpose of my role there is to support educators in elevating the voices and stories of Jewish women, ensuring that all of you know and are familiar with JWA's resources. And it's really supportive to me personally. In addition to those roles that I hold, I also teach at a synagogue, 6th and 7th graders. So I get to use JWA resources weekly with my learners and practice and test out these types of resources. So a little just preview of our time together. We'll do a little sharing around kind of our own experiences and grounding and who's in the room together, catching me up on the experiences we're bringing in together today. I'll do a short tour of JWA resources that might be relevant to your education work, and I'm happy to answer questions as we go through that. And then we'll do a little practice session, engaging with some of the resources in JWA's website and exploring what feels relevant and meaningful to your work, have some time for questions, and then we'll close out. So before we dive in, I'd love to hear, we were going to do a poll, but I think we can just share out loud since we're a smaller group. Would love to hear a little about who you are, Bailey and Beth, if you want to share like what your roles are, which hats you're wearing in this space. If you're a teacher, what setting do you teach in, and describing a little bit about who your learners are. I would love to hear that. Bailey, do you mind kicking us off?
Sure, since I'm already unmuted.
Yes, that's why I chose you.
I am the education director at Temple Shir Tikva in Winchester, and I've been in this role for about 10 years. Before that, I was a teacher there, and before that, I was a public school teacher, and I am also teaching 6th grade this year, and I think we are, Winchester is a very open, welcoming community that's very receptive to exploring all kinds of new resources. So I'm excited to learn about what you have to offer, and I'm really excited that you're going to be moving into the Temple Re'im space. That's really cool.
It's very exciting. Yeah, thank you. Amazing. How about you, Beth?
I am the ed director at Temple Sinai here in Sharon. I've been here, I guess this will be 8 years, and I've been a director for a long time, but I do teach a little. Sometimes I teach the 8th grade comparative religion, and this past 2 years, mostly because of COVID and then because whatever, budgets, I'm teaching K1 as well, which is fun. But, and so I know a little bit about the resources, but I too am looking for, to see about how to implement and kind of jazz up our curriculum for the, I don't know, like 4th grade and above kids.
Amazing. Great to meet you both. Thanks for sharing and getting me oriented. Yes, Mary,
So
go ahead.
just while I have a second, apparently there is some craziness with the Zoom. So, so far, okay. All right, I really don't know what we're going to do. So I think we'll just, okay, let's go ahead. I'm going to call Debbie, who did just respond to me.
Okay.
So
I was
Good.
going to
Let us
say,
know.
Mary and I used the, there was like an email once we registered that came from Hebrew College that had the Zoom. That's what I used. I just clicked. I don't know if you sent something different yesterday, but that's the one that I signed on. It was like sent from Hebrew College when I first registered.
yeah, so it should be the right one because whatever.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call Debbie and see what she can do.
Great.
All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No worries at all. We will go with the flow, and I'm glad it's being recorded. Folks can catch up as they need, and we can welcome anyone in as they come on if we'll have some more folks join us. And so maybe even all the more reason to still do this next piece in a Jamboard. Have either of you not used Jamboard before? Is that a new tool to anyone? Okay, great. So I'm just putting a link to a Jamboard in the chat here. And the first slide has a question inviting us to respond. Why is it important to teach Jewish women's stories? I'd love for each of us to add a couple thoughts to this. You can make post-it notes from that left toolbar, fourth icon down. And we'll start to gather some of our reactions to this question. Beautiful. Go ahead and add any more if additional thoughts come up. So far we have Jewish women's stories usually do not receive the same attention as male stories. So all students feel represented in Jewish stories and rituals to create safe learning spaces. I think it's important because the Bible stories are filled with tales of heroes that are mostly men. It's nice to inspire the girls with stories of women doing amazing things. And Jewish women traditionally worked in the home, and their stories were not as illustrious or glamorous. Nice. Thanks so much for these reasons. I think we could probably work together to fill this entire Jamboard with more and more reasons about how it only enriches our learning frameworks and the meaning making that can happen from Jewish learning when we're inviting in more and more stories, especially those who that have been overlooked or unheard for too long. Now I'm going to move us to the second slide on the Jamboard, the next frame. So if you click at the top where it says 1 out of 2, click to the right arrow, and you'll see 2 more questions there. How do Jewish women's voices show up in your teaching now? So if you're already integrating in some ways Jewish women's voices in your work at the synagogues that you're teaching at or directing curriculum, feel free to share that in post-its here. And then if you can think of anything that makes it hard to do that, any challenges or barriers, that'll be helpful for me in figuring out maybe what are the resources that would be most helpful. So someone said we try to divide our time between male and female horror stories. Beautiful. And a barrier is user-friendly resources. I feel sometimes it takes me a long time to find material. I know that feeling. It's like so frustrating. Oftentimes there aren't as many stories or sources about stories of Jewish women. Nice. Thank you. Do either of you have other thoughts to add just out loud? You can unmute and share about other things coming up with you for you on these questions, examples that you'd want to share, or specific topic that you've wrestled with. Any kind of additional thoughts? Wonderful. We have a new person.
Yeah, so I guess Debbie figured something out there.
Hi,
Yay. Hi,
Julie.
Julie. Welcome.
I was like, oh no.
Hi,
Thank you for
Julie.
figuring that out. Hello.
Welcome in. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Lucy with Jewish Women's Archive. We are just finishing up exploring a little bit of a Jamboard and kind of surfacing some questions and reactions around integrating. Maybe I'll wait because I see someone else coming
Yeah,
in.
good. Maybe. Excellent.
Do a
Good.
reset here. Wonderful.
So thanks, Bailey and Beth, for being patient. And I'm so glad
Yeah.
Mariah and Julie made it, and maybe some others will join us.
Yes, wonderful. I'm going to send the Jamboard one more time here. Welcome, Mariah. Welcome, Julie. We're just exploring this Jamboard that I put in the link in the chat around why it's important to teach Jewish women's stories. And if you move to the next frame, any challenges or barriers that might come up for teaching Jewish women's stories.
Oh, Mariah's really Liz. So hi, Liz.
Oh, Liz. Wonderful. Hi, Liz. Sorry about that.
Welcome. So glad you got here.
Very glad you're here. So maybe I'll share my screen to just give us a little intro to what we're doing. Feel free to add your thoughts to the Jamboard I put in the chat if you'd like to. But so far, we're coming up with some meaningful ideas and reasons why it's important to teach Jewish women's stories around representation, ensuring people feel safe and supported in their learning spaces, inspiring girls with stories of women, and this reality that Jewish women's stories often haven't gotten the same type of attention or platforms in our communities as stories of Jewish men. And then we're also sharing kind of ways that Jewish women's voices have shown up in our teaching and challenges and barriers that we've encountered, mostly having to do with like, it's hard to find user-friendly resources, it's challenging to find good material, it feels like there's just simply not as many stories or sources about Jewish women to integrate into our teaching. And so I'm going to move us just to ensure we have enough time to move through, and I definitely want to give you all time to talk with each other and explore some of these resources. I'm going to move us into just kind of a basic tour of Jewish Women's Archive and a brief introduction to the many resources that are available to you. So first of all, I'm going to start with collections. All of these resources are free and accessible on JWA's site, which is just jwa.org. We will be sure to share it with you. And this is, for those of you who just joined us, this is the largest digital archive of Jewish women's stories in the world. And all of it is available to you to explore and integrate into your teaching. And it's presented to you in a lot of different formats that can make it really easy to navigate. So collections is the first resource that I'll highlight. JWA has organized some stories of Jewish women into collections by theme. For example, some of the collection themes are on the screen here. Women rabbis is one example. So this collection includes highlights and profiles of specific women rabbis, a timeline of women in the rabbinate, thematic explorations like pluralism and progress in Israel and work-life balance, There are other collections like you see here, This Week in History, Power Couples, The Feminist Revolution, and more. So these collections could provide really meaningful resources for themed educational events, student projects, curriculum development, when you're thinking about where to find a lot of resources around a similar theme. Another great resource is the Multimedia Gallery. So we'll have some time to explore this resource specifically together, but this gallery includes photos, audio recordings of speeches and radio shows, interviews, artwork, videos, and more, all centered around elevating the voices and stories of Jewish women. I've used these resources for like decorating a classroom and a community space. I've definitely used a lot of the audio and video resources in my online teaching, especially. And it's really exciting because learners get to interact directly with the content and the voices of Jewish women throughout history through this gallery. So when we think about primary sources, oftentimes our first instinct is to think about really text-heavy resources, which is some of the resistance that educators have when we first introduce them to JWA, is like, okay, I'm teaching fifth graders. They don't want to read like a long, encyclopedia article about this Jewish woman. And the Multimedia Gallery creates a really amazing space for ensuring that there are lots of different ways for learning about these stories. And actually, the cool thing about this gallery is when you click on the resource, it shows you where in the Jewish Women's Archive site that image or other type of resource shows up. So it will link you to a blog post or a lesson plan, other resources to learn more and kind of see the context. Along those lines, JWA also produces a lot of amazing content every week that synthesizes Jewish women's voices of the past with contemporary voices, events, and movements of today through its blog and podcasts. These are great materials for like reading together with learners, listening to portions of the podcast together, inviting families to listen to a podcast or read a blog post together. There's even a full section of the blog that's written by JWA's Rising Voices Fellows, who are teen writers. So there's opportunity to be engaging with peers for teen learners as well. And for podcasts on Black Lives Matter and Me Too movement, JWA has some discussion and activity guides for listening to those podcasts together in groups who want to listen to and reflect on the learnings. Now I'm going to move to the education-specific resources. That being said, everything on the JWA website can be integrated into learning and teaching, but I'm actually going to bring us right to the site here while I'm sharing my screen to highlight some of these great resources. So first of all, under this education tab, you'll see lesson plans. JWA offers a wide variety of free lesson plans that address topics like Jewish women's involvement in the civil rights and labor movements, the developing role of women in Jewish ritual life, Jewish women's Torah stories, Jewish contributions to art and politics, and so much more.
Lucy,
And yeah,
sorry, what age group are these lesson plans geared to?
Thanks so much, Beth. There's a wide variety of age range application for these lesson plans. Living the Legacy is the curriculum around civil rights movement and labor rights movement. I've used those with learners as young as 7th and 8th grade, and they're mostly targeted for high school. My Bat Mitzvah Story is specifically targeting for B Mitzvah age students and learners. These Go and Learn lesson plans have at least 3 versions of each lesson plan. One is for youth, like younger learners, probably under middle school age, middle school and younger. Families education, so both with adults and young people together, and adult education. So they kind of give you examples on how to bring those resources to all three types of audiences. So for all of these other things I've done is sometimes, you can do an entire curriculum. I've done this when I first started teaching after college. It was my first ever time teaching at a supplementary school. I was told, you can teach any Jewish elective that you want, go off and do it, no structure or support on what the curriculum should look like, which happens in Jewish education spaces sometimes. And so I really leaned on JWA's curriculum at that time. I went through all of the individual lesson plans of Living the Legacy curriculum, one by one. It was so supportive. I actually learned so much about the strategy of teaching and how to have dynamic interaction and creative storytelling and inviting student voices in the learning by teaching this curriculum. And now I'm at a synagogue that does provide us curriculum and support, and I'm inheriting other, lesson plans to work with. So I can go into these lesson plans and find specific resources and activities. I can kind of cherry pick certain things that make sense. For example, some of the Living the Legacy lesson plans have gallery, like a gallery wall activity where you can print off photos of Jewish women throughout history on a certain topic. And there's like a reflection sheet that comes with that. That activity can be much more accessible to all ages, right? Like being able to look at images, look at art, look at photos, and interact with them is something that could go, even though Living the Legacy generally is targeting high school students. So there's a lot of flexibility, and I would encourage folks to really dive in and explore just what's available. And if there are certain areas of your curriculum you're hoping to build out, bigger questions that you have around, like, I'm looking for ways to integrate Jewish women's stories on X idea, you can always reach out to me. We'll share my email, and I'm happy to do a one-on-one, connecting and giving you ideas on where to look for our lesson plans. I'm going to move us along on some more resources here under the education tab. We have this activities and puzzles. So this is what it sounds like. We have a crossword puzzle about RBG and word searches. We have a scavenger hunt, which is an interactive scavenger hunt through the JWA website. This has been great for doing like a virtual field trip, inviting learners to get more familiar and finding Jewish women's stories on this amazing archive. I've used these as kind of take-home fun activities for families over breaks or summers or holiday times. So these are great ideas, warm-up activities to lean on. In general, we have some great teaching tools that are really helpful, both for you all as educators, and also I know some of you are education directors at synagogues, so you're thinking about professional development for other educators and faculty. This is a great, the teaching tools page has a lot of resources on teaching primary sources, talking about best practices for teaching texts, talking about creating analysis tools that can be used for JWA primary sources and any other primary sources outside of JWA too. And then finally, I want to highlight a relatively new JWA resource, which is Story Aperture. Story Aperture is a mobile app that empowers community members to become oral historians. So I'm going to share this. It's just like a 1-minute video as an introduction, and then I'll give a little bit more context and ideas.
May I just ask where that's found, where that is, Story Aperture?
Story Aperture, yes. So it's an app that you can download on any mobile device. And also there's a web page for it on JWA's site that gives all of those instructions and the context. So I can show you how to navigate to that as well. Yeah, thanks, Julie. Okay, so let's watch this together.
Jewish women have always been storytellers. Our stage is the family table, a child's bedside, the classroom, boardroom, podium, or pulpit. Yet too many of these stories go unrecorded and largely unremembered. Today, the Jewish Women's Archive puts the power in your hands to ensure women's voices are heard and documented. Story Aperture lets users of all ages collect and share stories of Jewish women through mobile technology. Here's how it works. First, download the Story Aperture app on your mobile device. Once inside the app, start by reviewing tips on how to conduct an interview, or select a question set to start recording. Within each question set, you can use JWA's suggested prompts, including thematic questions for conversations about race, philanthropy, education, and more. Or you can create your own questions. Whether telling your personal story or interviewing someone else, simply tap the record button found inside any question set and let it roll. You may pause and resume the recording whenever you'd like. When your interview is complete, click on the Finished Recording button to save your story along with an optional title and photo. Share your recording with JWA by uploading it directly through the app. Story Aperture gives you the opportunity to make meaningful connections with the people in your life and capture old memories, while making new ones. Add your story to the larger narrative of Jewish women and experience Story Aperture today.
Awesome. So that was a brief introduction to Story Aperture, but I've used this with middle school learners where we've kind of got folks set up with the app. We shared information about it with families over email, and then the students went home and interviewed their parents, their grandparents, an aunt, family members, neighbors about specific topics that we were learning about. We talked about oral history. We talked about that stories, so many Jewish stories have been passed down, by sharing verbally, and how, what that means for our culture. We talked about oral Torah. Like, there's so much richness in this tool, and JWA really provides the framework and support to make something that would otherwise maybe feel like a really big lift feel really smooth. So I highly recommend exploring this topic as well. So I know I kind of moved through that tour quickly. We'll definitely have some more time for specific questions toward the end, because I want to be sure we have time to connect in maybe pairs or smaller groups to explore. But does anyone have any kind of burning or thoughtful questions that are on the tip of your mind that you want to be sure you don't forget?
Well, I could just make a comment.
Please.
Just funny that we're, learning about this. This is wonderful. I wasn't familiar with this, but last night I was looking for a gift for a girl who just became a bat mitzvah, and I was searching for a book that would be appropriate for a girl that was inspiring. And I saw many books on Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Of course, there's several. Some are really younger than a bat mitzvah age girl. And I had a lot of difficulty finding something. And I tried to find something on Golda Meir, and either it was really not an appropriate book. So it's too young or it's too old. And I don't know this is just a website, but as an aside, if you know of things that would be inspirational, educational books about women, women leaders, Jewish heroes, and so forth, that would be helpful as well, in addition to this incredible resource.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. Actually, I gave a similar presentation to a Jewish librarian conference over the summer, and they had so many amazing books to recommend when I gave my presentation. So I can share that resource too. But JWA's website is really, at the core of it, has an amazing encyclopedia. And I would even go to the encyclopedia entry for Jewish women who you're excited about and look at the sources, because there are lots of books there that are good ideas, authors that are great ideas. But that's something that I know that JWA staff would love to offer ideas. The blog might usually we highlight like new authors that are writing about Jewish women. So that could be another good place to look. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks.
Maybe we have time for like one more question before we move into small groups. Okay, great. No problem. So we are going to move into small groups or pairs and actually get to interact a little bit with some of our resources. I'm just going to copy this link here. Okay. So here's our how we'll be spending our time. I'm putting in the chat in a moment a multimedia gallery link with the tag Hanukkah. This link will give us ideas on, or just all of the images, stories, art around Hanukkah on the JWA website. And in our pairs or small groups, I'll invite you to think about what ideas do these resources spark for your teaching? And in general, how might JWA's resources support you in integrating Jewish women's stories into your teaching? This is a great time to just share ideas, initial reactions. You can poke around on the site together for a bit. We'll be together for about 12 minutes. Does anyone have any questions before we move out into small groups? Chavruta. Okay, wonderful. Marion, whenever you're ready, you can open those up. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Great. All right.
So I'll pause the recording maybe.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope that it felt fruitful to get a little taste of JWA's website and starting to poke around and hear ideas from others. Love to hear from a few folks about any kind of key takeaways or ideas that feel exciting, where you're having energy after those conversations. Go ahead and unmute, or you can share in the chat if you prefer to.
Well, one thing I just spoke to you about is the connection between the resources and storytelling, the storytelling app, and using this. We already work with a storyteller, so how to connect that already, I love connecting pre-existing programming to something that can, further extend the reach. So this is great.
Nice. Yeah. Thanks, Bailey. Yeah, Bailey and I chatted about the opportunity that JWA has partnered with other synagogues, organizations around that Story Aperture app to create custom question sets that are relevant to your community, and also to be able to share the stories. Right now, when stories are submitted, they're added to the JWA Oral History Archive. And if you partner, then you as that community organization would get access to those stories to use however you want to. So that's a sweet opportunity there too. Thanks, Bailey. Any other takeaways, things that feel exciting?
I just look forward to exploring so many resources. Really, it's wonderful.
Thanks, Julie.
Lucy, what I heard in the room that I was in for a bit, just sort of how overwhelming it can be, and sort of how narrow can we get in a search. So I know you didn't necessarily ask for questions yet, but I think that's something, the takeaway of feeling like, wow, this is amazing. But so thinking about how to narrow things down to find what people might really be what would be really useful.
Nice, thanks. Yeah, and we can move into questions now too. So that's a great transition. Yeah, I think trying to narrow down the search terms is great. There's a general search bar at the very top right of the full JWA site. So the Multimedia Gallery just pulls things that aren't text, but that general search bar will also pull encyclopedia entries and blog posts. I would say in general, if you know that you have a certain topic that you're hoping to dig into, you can do the search. And if that feels overwhelming, just focus on the encyclopedia entry as a starting point, because it'll give you robust materials, and then but be like one page, and you can go from there, decide how much more exploring and further you want to do. Another thing that I would say, kind of like Julie was saying, is to take some time to simply explore, not feeling like you're looking for something specific, so that when you are looking for something specific, you have a greater sense of like what's out there in the landscape. And I mentioned this earlier, I'm not sure that everyone who's here heard this, so I want to say again, if there are specific ideas that you're wanting to integrate and you're curious about where it might live in JWA, you can always reach out to me. We can do that over email, phone, or Zoom, and I'm happy to kind of match make with JWA resources too. And we can also do tours with other educators in your program. And this was like a quick taste overview, but we can always do a deeper dive into tours to help everyone feel oriented. What other questions are coming up for folks?
Well, we had spoken a little bit about the Hanukkah entries that we saw, and some of them brought up some issues about how to talk about the movies in particular that were highlighted, how to make that into a lesson, or that, and just some of them seem to feature like Christmas. So we're thinking how to really deal with that difficult issue if we didn't, how to explore that in terms of a lesson, or how to build lessons out of some of those things that you pulled up with the Hanukkah entry.
Nice. Great feedback. Thank you. Yeah. And one thing, I'm going to share my screen just to show you this. Not this yet. Okay. So if we're in the Multimedia Gallery and we see a resource like any of there were those stills from a movie that I think probably are what sparked it, but here's one. Underneath the image or the video, whatever it is, it will say related content. And basically this shows you, here's the places this image shows up in the JWA site. So those movie stills were from a blog. So the blogs can sometimes help give framing or give a perspective or a way to introduce through a writer's voice, like a topic. So definitely be sure to check out this related content when you're in the Multimedia Gallery, if there's a specific resource that looks really good to you. I do want to highlight a few of the other Hanukkah related resources. So this is in the Encyclopedia, is the Hanukkah entry in Encyclopedia. This goes through things like women's role in the ritual, different types of practices throughout time, different ways that Jewish women's voices have been integrated into the holiday. So this is kind of a lot of good learning that could be embedded into lesson planning. And in general, when you're in the encyclopedia, how that looks is that you can browse by category. You can always search specific terms, but you can also browse by category. If you're doing a cooking class, a teaching lesson, you can go right to recipes, right? Like Jewish holidays, here they all are. So this can be a good place to get started when you're first starting to dig into a topic. And then also I want to highlight, we saw in the Multimedia Gallery some art images of Judith, and there's actually a full lesson plan about Judith in the Girls in Trouble lesson plan category. And all of the Girls in Trouble lesson plans center around music and inviting learners to create their own musical midrash. So there are stories, songs, activities for creating your own midrash and interpretation. And then every lesson plan has these teacher resources so that the educator themselves can feel really knowledgeable and like they have the resources they need to dig into the content as well. Any final questions before I move us into our closing? Okay, so 2 things. First of all, I know that as we move into Hanukkah, it's so near, I still can barely believe it. we will likely all encounter the metaphor that as educators, we're the shamash candle, we're helping light the lights of others. And this is so true and so important. And also it's really important to me that each of your flames are nurtured and nourished. And I hope you feel that JWA is a match there to support your flame when you're feeling burnt out. And with that, I'm going to invite us to co-create a little blessing together, just as a closing ritual before we sign off. So feel free to type in the chat the closing to this blessing. May Jewish educators everywhere be blessed with. Go ahead and add your blessing in the chat. So please feel free, keep writing in your blessings. I'm going to stop sharing. So as I read out our full blessing, you can see each other's faces, smile at each other, acknowledge that we're all here in person wherever we are. And when I'm finished, feel free to unmute and we'll do a big messy amen together over Zoom. So may Jewish educators everywhere be blessed with calm, support, warmth, good health, great satisfaction from their holy work, kindness, understanding, satisfaction, compassion, patience, understanding, the knowledge that some of their students are affected by our teaching and will become connected with our people in a positive way. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Kenya Hiratzon, may it be
Thank you
so.
very much. That was so lovely.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, everyone. Please be in touch. My email's on the screen here. Looking forward to staying connected and exploring resources together. Thanks for your important work in the world.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Lucy, and thank you everyone for coming today. And we'll put the recording up on our website and I'll let everybody know. But please share this already with the educators that you work with. So it's good to see you all. Happy
Thanks so much,
Thanksgiving
Marian, for
and
Happy
organizing.
Hanukkah Sameach.
Hanukkah.
Thank you.
Hagarim Sameach.
Hag
Yeah.
Sameach.